The early 19th century. China is a vast empire, but over the next 100 years, it will be systematically humiliated. The British forced it to trade opium at gunpoint. China lost wars and gave up territory. It lost Hong Kong. It lost Taiwan. European powers carved up Chinese ports as if they were their own. Russia took a couple of chunks in the north and the west. Japan took a piece in the east. A country that had once been the richest in the world was reduced to a semi-colony. Then came the 20th century, and you know what? Things got even worse. In 1911 came the Xinhai Revolution. The Qing Dynasty, which had ruled for 268 years, collapsed. And what happened next? Civil war. Military factions and so-called warlords began carving up the country like a pie. Whoever was the strongest ruled their own province. In the north, the Soviet Union turned Mongolia and Xinjiang into its satellites. And then, just as the country was already lying in ruins and fighting itself, Japan invaded in 1937 and unleashed genocide. The Nanjing Massacre, 300,000 people killed in 6 weeks. China became the country with the second highest death toll in World War II, after the Soviet Union. The communists and the nationalists of Kuomintang hated each other, but they were forced to unite against Japan. And as soon as Japan surrendered in 1945, they went right back to fighting each other. World War II had barely ended, a war that had already claimed 20 million lives in China, and it was immediately followed by another 4 years of civil war. So that's a century and a half of humiliation, lost territory, starvation, wars, foreign occupation, and internal bloodshed. No wonder that in 1949 the country was, to put it mildly, in pretty rough shape. Then, with Soviet support, the communists won the war in China. Mao Zedong proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China on October 1st, 1949. And it seemed like it was it. Finally, a united country, the chaos was over, and it was time to start building a normal nation. At that point, China had around 540 million people, already more than the entire population of Europe. It had a vast territory, access to the sea, and abundant natural resources. So you'd think all that was left to build and develop. But no. To put it bluntly, Mao Zedong was an outstanding military leader and utterly disastrous administrator. What he did to the country is almost beyond comprehension. Mao forced peasants into collective farms and ordered the entire country to produce steel. Right in their backyards, in makeshift furnaces. People melted down their own pots and pans just to meet production quotas. The quality of steel was so poor it was practically useless, but the quotas had been met, the reports filled. Meanwhile, when everyone was busy melting metal, there was no one left to harvest the crops. So famine followed. This campaign was called the Great Leap Forward. Between 1959 and 1961, somewhere between 15 and 55 million people died of starvation. It remains one of the largest man-made famine in human history. Why is the estimate so broad? Well, who exactly do you think was counting the dead in China at the time? Especially under a totalitarian dictatorship that had every reason to suppress information that contradicted its official image. Mao knew the scale of the disaster, and he carried on anyway. Then came the Cultural Revolution. Mao decided that educated people were a threat. Scientists, doctors, teachers, engineers, they were all sent to work in the fields. Universities were shut down, books were burned, people were publicly humiliated, tortured, and killed for being bourgeois elements. China deliberately destroyed its own educated class. And here's another one of Mao's brilliant ideas: wiping out the sparrows. Seriously, sparrows ate grain, so Mao declared them enemies of the people. Across China, people were chasing birds on the streets, never letting them land until they dropped dead from exhaustion. The sparrows were exterminated. Then it turned out that sparrows also ate crop-destroying insects. Without them, insect population exploded and devoured the harvest. The famine became even worse. Now take a look at the world in 1970s. Everything revolved around two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The Cold War, the space race, constant tension. And China? China was a backwater. No offense, but that's simply a fact. By the 1970s, China was in a deep hole. real poverty, isolation, a shattered education system, millions dead, and individual initiative crushed. Meanwhile, other Asian countries, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, were booming, setting record after record and in many areas outspacing even the United States technologically. China, meanwhile, stood still. And yet, and this is important, China already had everything it needed for growth. A huge population, more than 800 million people in the 1970s, an enormous territory, access to the sea, a strategic location of major trade routes, a centralized government that for all its flaws at least kept the country united, unlike the fractured, warring pieces that had existed before, natural resources, coal, metals, rare earth elements. The only thing this country really needed was to stop hurting itself, simply stop burying such enormous potential. Mao Zedong died in 1976, and a new generation of communists led by Deng Xiaoping realized something important. They looked at their neighbors, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, and saw what had happened there. In just 20 to 30 years, those places had gone from impoverished post-war ruins to thriving economies. How? Deng Xiaoping made a decision that changed history. He began rolling back communism. Yes, you heard that right. The communists started building capitalism. They called it socialism with Chinese characteristics. They kept the sign on the door and kept the party in power, but in practice, they began doing almost everything the opposite of what Mao had done. The reforms started in the countryside. Farmers were allowed to sell part of their harvest on the open market. The collective farming system began to fall apart. People started working for themselves. Agricultural output soared almost immediately. In just 2 to 3 years. That's how incentives work. When people work for the state, they pretend to work. When they work for themselves, they work for real. The next step of Deng was even bolder. In 1980, he created the special economic zones, areas of China with different rules. Foreign companies were allowed to open factories, pay low taxes, and repatriate their profits. In 1980, Shenzhen was a fishing village with a population of 30,000. Today, it's a mega city of 17 million people, home for the headquarters of Huawei, Tencent, BYD, and hundreds of other technology companies. In just 40 years. Is that even possible? Deng Xiaoping believed it was. And that's when something happened that had seemed impossible just a few years earlier. A country that had only recently been destroying its own scientists and starving millions of its own people suddenly began opening up to the world. The communists had now embraced markets, foreign investment, and private initiative. How did China transform from one of the poorest countries in the world into the factory of the world? Why did Western companies willingly move their technology and manufacturing there? And how did yesterday's backwater become America's biggest rival? We begin in 1991. China's communist neighbor, the Soviet Union, collapses. One of the world's two superpowers simply ceases to exist. Why? Because its economy wasn't flexible, its political system was rigid, and when Gorbachev introduced his reforms, the system could not withstand them and collapsed. China decided to take a different approach, open up the economy, leave the political system untouched. No multi-party system, the Communist Party remains in charge. But at the same time, markets, trade, foreign investment. This is what became known as Chinese model, authoritarian politics combined with the market economy. And it works, no matter who criticize it. Then Americans and Europeans enter the picture. They look at China and see a gold mine. Imagine your own factory in Ohio where a worker earns $15 per hour. In China, the same worker earns 50 cents for the same job. On top of that, no labor unions, no environmental restrictions, no labor inspections. And the government itself builds the roads and ports needed to ship your products. Western corporations began moving their manufacturing to China on a massive scale. Nike, Apple, General Electric, Boeing, they all did. At first, China simply provided cheap labor for making basic goods, toys, clothes, shoes, then electronics, then complex industrial components, then entire factories. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization. This was a pivotal moment. Now, Chinese goods could be sold around the world with minimal tariffs. exports exploded. Over the next 10 years, China became the world's largest exporter, surpassing Germany. And what's inside the country? Infrastructure development accelerates on a scale unlike anything in the world. China has built more high-speed rail than the rest of the world combined, over 40,000 kilometers, and speed goes up to 350 kilometers per hour. Some of the world's largest ports, Shanghai, Ningbo, Shenzhen, are in China, and some of the world's largest airports are built in China. Every few years, entirely new megacities rise from scratch. Of all this, cheap labor, foreign capital, and massive state investment in infrastructure created an economic boom without precedent in modern history. Between 1980 and 2020, China's GDP grew roughly in 40 times. Nearly 1 billion people have been lifted out of poverty. That is more than the entire population of the United States, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom combined. But industrial growth requires resources: oil, gas, metals, coal. And this is where China found a key partner: Russia, a vast country with enormous reserves of everything industry needs. Sharing a 1,000-kilometers-long border with China, Russia supplies China with resources while China exports manufactured goods. They begin building pipelines, trade routes. Their economies became increasingly integrated, deepening economic ties. When the West imposed sanctions on Russia, China became even more important as a partner. And that's good for China. Cheap resources are secured for the long term, while China itself has become the dominant player in the Russian market. For a long time, people said that China could copy but not invent. Maybe that was true in 1990s, but not anymore. Huawei is one of the world's largest telecommunication equipment manufacturers, so influential that the United States placed the company on a blacklist and banned American firms from selling its chips. When country targets your technology company like this, it is seen as a real threat. In 2023, BYD surpassed Tesla in global electric vehicle sales. Chinese EVs flooded European markets so extensively that the European Union imposed special tariffs to protect domestic manufacturers. German automakers, once global leaders, are now defending their positions against Chinese competition. And what about TikTok? It is owned by Chinese company ByteDance. This app is used by 1.5 billion people worldwide. The United States has tried for years to ban it because of its influence over public opinion in the US. China is now the world's largest producer of solar panels, controlling around 80% of the global market. It is also the largest producer of batteries and is building more nuclear reactors than the rest of the world combined. It has successfully deployed the rover on the far side of the moon, the first country ever to do so. China is no longer merely the world's factory. It is a genuine global technological power. And this is where tensions begin. For decades, the United States used China as a cheap manufacturing base. It benefited everyone. Americans got inexpensive goods, while China got jobs and technology. But China stopped being just a factory. It became a competitor. The tariff war under Trump and technology sanctions under Biden reflected the realization that China was moving beyond the role of junior partner and laying claim to global leadership. The United States and Europe themselves helped create the very power they now fear. The dragon rose up. Taiwan. China considers the island to be its own territory. Why do the United States guarantee its defense and refuse to give it up? Because Taiwan produces the biggest part of the world's most advanced computer chips. TSMC is a Taiwanese company that makes processors for iPhone, Google servers, and American military systems. Whoever controls Taiwan controls the global semiconductor industry. That's exactly why the United States reacts so strongly to any Chinese pressure on Taiwan. So how did China become a superpower? The first reason is its enormous advantages China has always had: a massive population, the world's largest labor force, a vast territory rich in resources, and a strategic position along key trade routes. China has always had this, even when it was poor. The second reason: the right reforms at the right time. Deng Xiaoping opened the country to markets and foreign investment. He gave farmers economic freedom and fed the country. He created special economic zones and attracted Western corporations. He reformed the economy while leaving politics unchanged. The third reason: Western corporations brought capital and technology. China used them, learned from them, copied them, and then improved them. The fourth reason, the government invested in infrastructure on a scale no other country had. Roads, ports, railways, energy. That reduced production and logistics costs for everyone. The fifth reason, the partnership with Russia provided cheap resources. On top of that, China has a huge domestic market which by itself is already larger than the economies of most countries. Together, these factors created an economic miracle that lifted China from poverty to the top of the global economy in just 40 years. But here's the question few people dare to ask out loud. What comes next? China is running out its most important resource, people. The one-child policy introduced in 1980 helped prevent mass poverty, but its consequences are now clear. The birth rate has collapsed. The population is aging. In 2022, China recorded its first population decline in 60 years. In 4 years, it lost around 6 million people. India has now overtaken China in population. According to demographic projections, by the end of the 21st century, China could lose a third or even half of its population. That means a smaller workforce, fewer consumers, and more retirees who need to be supported. On top of that, youth unemployment in China has reached record highs. Economic growth is slowing. The real estate market is in crisis. Evergrande, the country's largest property developer, went bankrupt with 300 billion in debt. Western companies are gradually moving manufacturing to Vietnam, India, and Mexico, places where it's cheaper and safer. The authoritarian system that once helped China grow so quickly is now increasingly stifling innovation. Private companies no longer feel secure. At any moment, the state can step in and say, "We're in charge now." China is a genuine global power with real technology, real military, and a real economy. History offers plenty of examples of seemingly unshakable powers collapsing faster than expected, especially when they lose the resource they depend on most. For China, this resource is people. Will China maintain its influence by the end of this century, or will we witness the decline of another great power? That is a question no one knows the answer to yet. But one thing is already clear, this story is far from over. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and stay tuned for the next one. They'll be just as interesting.